Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. We're so happy that you're joining us today, that you're back either watching online or listening to us on so many different platforms that the Catholic Buzz is on. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm always joined by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Josh, how are you?
Good. I'm doing good.
You doing okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing new to report these days?
No.
And over here, Matt Van Milligan. Welcome,
Hello.
Matt. Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Yeah.
You are both. I think we're all wearing hoodies today.
Yeah.
It was the hoodie.
This
It's
is
the hoodie time. Yeah.
It's cold.
Yeah.
eh?
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's cold. Not so much in our studio, I guess, but it's cold outside.
Yeah. It makes you feel cozy.
Yeah,
It's
this
just nice that everybody reads their emails. That's good.
That's
Yeah.
right. Good thing we didn't all wear the same color. How embarrassing
It
would
would
that have
be.
been
Yeah.
if we all wore the same thing? Yeah. Nice to have you guys all together again because we got lots to talk about today. You know, today is actually a topic we're going to talk about that I get asked all the time.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I walk into a classroom, every time, it comes up in conversation, or even when, this is going to be really funny, but even when I'm at wedding receptions, back when we used to have them, and people kind of avoid the priest for a little while. They're like, oh, we can't talk about priests at a wedding reception. I mean, how, and then of course they get a little bit of liquid courage, and
then
so
they
then they start coming up to me like, oh, Father, thanks. That was a nice wedding today. And they start small talk, and inevitably
You asked
the question gets asked to me, why can't you get married? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Why, or should priests get married? Why can't priests get married? It's a question I get a lot.
I can imagine. I mean, especially like a lot of people with recent things that we hit the news, especially in the last 30, 40 years with all the scandals and everything else, it seems to be like the qualifier. Like if only they could get married, things wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
I want to talk about that too.
yeah,
because
that seems to be something. But like you're linking too many things together. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, and so the question, should priests get married? And so, people always ask me the question. Actually, not very long ago, someone asked me the question, don't you wish you were married? Like they asked me specifically, don't you wish you were married? Yeah. As a priest, not like instead of being one. So instead of the question like, should priests get married? They were asking me personally, don't you wish you were married? So lots of people are curious about it. I don't know how many people actually talk to a priest about it either.
No, it seems to be something that they would talk to amongst themselves or comment on Facebook or, you know what I mean? Like all these things, but not actually ask a priest whether they want to get married or not want to get married.
Like I picture it, people gathered around their dining room tables, at the Van Milligan family reunion and just having this conversation. Why can't Father Daniele get married? Or why can't priests get married?
No,
it's a conversation that happens even amongst Catholics.
Yeah, I wish it happened at our family reunion. I'm kind of the opposite. I have lots to say about this topic, but nobody ever asks me. I've never had the opportunity.
No one wants to talk about it with you, right?
Yeah.
But it's a question people are asking around their dinner tables or conversations with family, and no one really asks a priest.
No.
And so, do I wish I was married as a priest? I'll just go out and answer it now live on our podcast. No, I don't wish that I was married as a priest, right? And there are a number of reasons why, for me personally, I would say if I'm going to be honest here, for me, I felt called to be a priest. I felt called to serve the Lord through the priesthood.
How many years did you follow that call?
Like, how many years have I been a priest?
No, how many years did you discern that call?
Oh, I was in the seminary officially discerning for 6 years.
So for 6 years, did you know that you couldn't get married if you became a priest?
Yes.
So for 6 years, you discerned that decision.
That's right. And actually, that's a good point. That's a really big part of our discernment process. Like, in the seminary, they're really good at helping us discern, are you called to be a priest, but are you also called to celibate chastity? To be a celibate person in the world, right? So that was something we were actively discerning in my 6 years in the seminary. Some people felt they were called to be a priest, but not live up to celibate chastity. So they leave, and they leave gracefully, and there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Of course not.
But for me personally, being a priest, it was a call, it was a vocation. I'm very blessed every day to be a priest, to the many blessings that come from the priesthood, one of the blessings that would not be part of my life if I was married, I would be such a horrible husband, and I would be such a horrible husband. I would be such a horrible father, because you guys, I mean, maybe people at home don't know this, but you guys know, we talk a lot about what we do, and you know a lot about my priestly ministry. I'm not home very often. Like, I leave my house early in the morning. I'm not back till late at night, like every single day. Just because that's where my ministry calls me to be available to people.
But like, if you were to look at your job, like it's your vocation, and it's a vocation because it's your life. You're living it out versus a job, right? It's if people look at the priesthood as a job, this is a terrible job to be married to, like to somebody too, because you're getting up in the middle of the night and rushing off to the hospital if you have to do. You're gone all day. You're going into all the places. Like you're doing daily masses. It's not like it's not like you're not doing anything. It's not like you're only working on Sundays.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But
I think we talked about that when Bishop Dowd was here, right? Like, what does a priest do all day? But honestly, my ministry calls me to be with people in all sorts of capacities all day long, and that's part of my ministry. Like I enjoy that. I enjoy being with people, right? Like, there are priests who can't handle a schedule like that, right? Just because of age or stage or health or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And in either case, it kind of flips the lens on the way that people want to talk about it. There's like, they'll see priests not being able to be married as a limitation, that this is it's something you can't do, but it's actually something that enables you to do the ministry that you do, whether you're,
Honestly, I agree, Matt. It's a gift. Like, I know, like in seminary, they used to say, celibate chastity, when lived correctly, can be a gift. And some people would snicker and be like, "What kind of gift is that?" They would often leave the seminary, but but it is a gift because it frees me to be who I was called to be, a priest for the people. I'm not a priest for myself. I'm a priest for others.
I was thinking two things. First of all, if anybody was to share stuff with me, right away, I hope they would know, like, the only person that I'd ever share anything with is my wife. But I don't have secrets with my wife. You know what I mean? Yeah. So in that form, I know that sharing with you is not being shared between two other people that might be talking about me behind my back or anything else. It's being shared, like, you are my confidant or whatever. But on the second part of that is when we try to get together for something, let's say beer and wings or whatever else, what is the most likely response from myself? I got to talk to my wife. You know what I mean? Like, can you come and do this right now? Oh, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm sitting on the couch doing absolutely nothing. So can I? Yes, I can. But I got to ask my wife first if I'm allowed. Right. And not whether I'm allowed or not, but she might have other thoughts that we were going to do. And my relationship with my wife comes first rather than hanging out with boys or even just going and doing ministry.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a very biblical way of looking at it. That it's, you have St. Paul saying that, like, for some, it's better to not be married because the married person is concerned with their
affairs of their It's true, and I agree with the words of St. Paul because it's true. My attention is always on the people I'm called to serve. Yeah, right, and that's at all hours of the day, like you said. And that's not to say, I'm not asking for pity. I'm not asking, I'm not. No. Yeah. I'm not saying, I get up in the middle of the night and go to the hospital. I love that. Like maybe in the moment you get a phone call and you're like, but I love it. You're with a family at all hours of the night. All joking aside, if I did have a wife or children, I would be.
It would be more of a struggle. Yeah, and that's like, could you imagine having to put the decision if someone was dying? The reason I bring this up is because I talked to an Anglican priest. People don't realize that in the Catholic Church there can be married priests in very special circumstances, and very specifically, it's normally to do with they were priests in very specific Christian denominations. In this case, he was an Anglican priest,
right?
And then he got very special permission from Rome through the bishop and everything else that he could, because he was Anglican and he was becoming Catholic, and he could maintain his priestly ministries, and so he became a married Catholic priest in that order. Now, not only are they saying that, but we're talking about the Roman Catholic order where we don't have, but in our Eastern or Orthodox churches, there are married priests at that time,
Of course,
long
yeah.
as you're married before you become the priest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I bring that up is because he had to make he was in the discussion about it, and he had to make the decision, not make the decision, but he had to answer the question: if you were having your firstborn child, your wife was in the hospital having the firstborn child, and in a hospital across town was someone dying, and they needed a priest, who do you choose? And right there, the married man was like, "Oh, do I put my priestly ministry first, or do I put God first? You know, do I push my priestly ministry first, or do I put my family first? Like, which side of the vocation do I live out first?"
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine making that decision or having to. And that's one of the really good reasons why you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
As a priest.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the history of that, right? Because we talked about my personal views, but who cares about that, right? Well, let's talk about why priests are celibate, right? Because I know if you look, one easy look at the scriptures, Saint Peter, there's that scripture with his mother-in-law and all these things. We know that he was married. He's the first pope of the church, right? So it's not always that priests were called to be celibate or asked to be celibate, right?
So there was even popes that were married at one time.
Yeah. I think there was about 7 or 8 popes in history that
Out of
were
how
legally
many?
married.
Yeah.
Of 266.
Okay,
Pope
so-
Francis,
so,
266, right? Still a small number, but
Yeah.
and I think at the time too, just from what we're reading, like you mentioned 1 Corinthians chapter 7:32, like the married man is concerned with the affairs of his wife, and the unmarried man is concerned with the affairs of the Lord. But at the time, it was optional, right? For priests, presbyters had the option of being celibate.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's and looking at it through the lens of vocation, I think is the best way, because you gave an example of like where these two vocations are in contention, or that's like you are obligated by your vocation to opposite possibilities. We talked in a previous episode about like that's vocation is different from a profession. A priest's profession isn't to be a priest. It's a vocation, because a vocation is not to get into the whole that Cardinal Sarah a couple years ago in response to it was in the context of the Amazonian Synod. So there was a lot of concern about, okay, is this is the church going to open up its definition of deacons, etc. Are they going to make allowances on priestly celibacy just to encourage more vocations, get more priests, especially to areas where they're not? And you're saying there's an ontological link between priesthood and celibacy, and this is kind of exactly what St. Paul is saying, that being married isn't just a descriptive difference, the same like a profession, like I'm because that could change down the road. It's like, no, I'm a married person, and the biblical, like a man shall leave his father's home, be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. It affects an actual change in the person.
Right.
Same with a priestly vocation.
Yeah.
So
there's an ontological change.
Yeah. So you have this discussion emerging in the church, because you said it wasn't always that way. Mm-hmm. So you have up until even like first millennia. And Josh, you mentioned like the Eastern churches, the Byzantine churches still have priests that are married, as long as they're married before they're ordained, because
that's very specific.
That ontological reality of ordination and of marriage. What you have this kind of increasing divide between the Eastern and Western churches on this exact point, because there's maybe a growing realization that these two aren't as compatible. Even if they were kind of theologically compatible at a practical level, it's tough to reconcile that. So by the 12th century, that's when you have kind of a formalization from the church that says, okay, no, priests ordained from this point on need to be celibate.
And I think it's important to note that at that time, it was the people that were taking that vow that were making that decision. It wasn't forced on those, you know what I mean? It wasn't like
some external person.
Exactly.
Saying,
Like you now are that way. You know what I mean? Like every person that has that has become a priest or whatever has chosen that. It's been called to it through their vocation, but has sacrificed that area of their life.
Yeah.
I remember one time I was talking to a bishop about, I was talking to somebody who was talking to a bishop about joining the priesthood. And the bishop said to them, do you want kids? And he's like, yeah. Do you want a wife? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, good. You need to want those things, because if you didn't want those things, then I wouldn't want you to be a priest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because then you're not sacrificing a whole relationship part of your life for Jesus and for God and for the church. You know what I mean? Like, you are giving that up so that you can have that relationship with the church. And so anyways, it was cool. It was a cool way when he was talking to me about it. I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. You know what I mean? Like that, yeah, like these aren't guys who don't want to get married and don't want to have kids, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's, insultingly what people say, like, oh, you kind of like settled into this because you couldn't have any other options.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think it's insulting, right? But yeah, I think, today especially, it's a difficult vocation.
Yeah.
And I don't agree that because it's difficult that we should just open the doors to marry priests. Like, do I think priests should get married? We talked about me.
Yeah.
We talked about me personally. Do I think I should get married?
Yeah.
I said no. Do I think priests should be able to get married in general?
Yeah.
I'm going to still say no. Because if maybe people will be upset with me for saying this, but if a priest has time to be married, then he's not doing his priestly job right. And I really believe that.
Vocation, not profession. Yeah.
Exactly, right? I just don't, the divided heart really comes to mind. Now, people will say, like, can the church change the fact that priests can get married? Sure, like Matt was talking about in the 12th century when this became a rule to follow. So it's about 1,000 years now that we've been following this priestly celibacy. It's a discipline of the church. It's not a dogma. It's not a doctrine. Remember, we did an episode a long time ago with the difference. It's a discipline of the church in order for people to grow for the kingdom of God, like in salvation, to grow in their salvation, their personal salvation, to follow their vocation in life. It's a discipline. Mm-hmm. So can it be changed? Yes, it can. Mm-hmm. It's not a dogma of the church. Should it be changed? Yeah. I'm going to say no. I think it's really neat to see people give up their life. That's another thing too, is we talk about, why does a priest live a celibate life? He's in the person of Christ, in persona Christi, right? He's in the person of Christ. So he's taking on the life of Jesus, in many ways. Yeah. One, Jesus was unattached. Yeah. So Jesus was free to go and minister to people, right? Just like the priest is free, unattached, and he's free to go. Sometimes we're called to go to a different city, to a different parish, to a different ministry, whatever. Yeah. We have that freedom without ruining the lives of our, wife having to quit her job, kids have to switch schools, all those different things, right? So that's one thing. We're in the person of Christ. Also, being in the person of Christ, Jesus gave up his life for everyone. Like Jesus gave up his life. He offered his life on the cross for all people. Priests also make a sacrifice. Yeah. They sacrifice this part of what most people would experience in marriage and children, right? To serve. It's a vocation of service, right? I'm at service of the people of God because God has called me to this, right? It's not like, I just gave up on marriage or gave up, on a sexual life or whatever. Yeah. Mind you, I always say, people are so interested in the sex life of a priest. They're always asking, why are you celibate? Whatever. If I asked as many times to people about their sex life as much as they ask me, geez, there'd be a problem, right? But it's true. Like we give up that, we give up that in service for the people. Yeah. It's great, I think, when we see people who accept God's call, who are set apart, not better, not above, not better or to be revered or whatever it is, but they're set apart from the people to lead people to Jesus, to guide people to the sacraments, to, even our religious sisters who take a vow of chastity, of celibate chastity, same thing. They're giving up their life. They're making a sacrifice to serve people. It's all for the sake of God's people. And I think there's something beautiful about it. Is it difficult? At times, sure. People always say, isn't it lonely? I always say that there's a difference between being lonely and being alone. Yeah. I'm alone. I'm alone sometimes, right? but I'm rarely lonely.
Yeah.
And I think some priests lonely?
Yes.
Sure they are.
Yeah.
But I think it takes work from the priest. I think it takes prayer, and it's what you make of it too. I'm blessed to, I'm not afraid to go and meet people and invite myself over places or do whatever it takes, right? So, and to have good friends and to good people in the parish, good, like our crew here for the podcast, when we get together, it's always a great time. That's a community of people working together for a common goal, right? Then there's a larger community in the church. There's lots of ways where priests are involved. Also, I see myself as a member of everyone's family. The priest is a member of everyone's family.
And that's
I might not
true.
have my family, my own family, but I'm a member of everyone's family.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not as though you sacrifice entirely the idea of family. It's that it takes on a different form. It's like you have way more people that call you father than I have people that call me father.
Right.
That it's you have that paternal. It's a proper direction of that paternal instinct, but to a broader family group.
Exactly. I think there's something special about that. I think there's something unique. Like, Jesus went to and fro. He walked into people's houses and, I do that with some people.
Yep.
Matt keeps his door locked.
You're always welcome at our house.
But, so there's a difference between lonely and alone.
Yeah.
And so is it lonely? No. Can it be? Sure it can. It can be lonely. For me, it's not. It hasn't been.
And I think if a priest was listening right now and found it lonely, then there's a challenge there. Look at why. You know what I mean? Because there are maybe you got to go back to your seminarian days and find out what's going on here that you're lonely versus being alone. Yeah, there's a difference.
And I think just like normal people, I don't want. Maybe I shouldn't have said normal people, but just like normal people, I guess people create their own misery. I think you know. Yeah. Like if a priest is lonely, maybe he's created that. Maybe he's turned down too many offers to be invited. Maybe he's not maybe doesn't appreciate the company of people. I don't know. Whatever it might be. Maybe he's created that for himself. I've never been in a situation. Thanks be to God. I'm grateful every day for my vocation. I'm grateful for the people I meet. I'm grateful for the path that God has set me on. You mentioned there are priests that are married. There are. So the Catholic Church does have rites, like the Eastern rites. The Ukrainian Catholic Church comes to mind. Yeah. Priests are married, can be married.
Yeah, and even that's not an uncomplicated thing. No. That it's so it's not as though it's just this open door of like, okay, well, come to this rite because then all the priests can become married. No, it's that they need to be married before they're ordained. If you hold certain positions or even bishops, if you want to be a bishop, you can't be married. Even for, you talked about Anglicans coming in. There are entire communities of Anglicans that the Ordinariate of St. Peter that Pope Benedict established. Even then, the Anglican Ordinariate priest that I know, it wasn't as though, okay, just come on, it's fine. It's like deal. No, he had to relinquish his priestly faculties for I think over a year, and then he was kind of reordained within. Sure. So even within like the broader umbrella of the church that we rightly call Catholic, and even within the Roman like aspects of the Roman Rite itself, yes, we do have married priests, but again, that takes into account that these it's not uncomplicated to have these two vocations simultaneously.
Yeah.
Throw in a little loop.
Yeah, sure.
What would you say to people that would say, well, how do you counsel people or whatever that are like, so I'm a married man. How can you possibly understand my problems?
Sure.
Or a married woman. How can you possibly understand? And because it is something that I would imagine people bring to priests a lot is their personal issues and problems and everything else. What would you say? Like how is it that,
Yeah, people say that a lot, actually. People say, like, how could you counsel married couples if you're not married?
Yeah. How do you know those problems?
I mean, first, I think it's a little bit ridiculous to say that, right? Like, someone who counsels people with drug addiction, they don't need to have had a drug addiction, right? But there's tools that we have to counsel people in certain situations. I think there are spiritual problems that abound in any vocation or any lifestyle or whatever that the priest should be at least a bit of an expert on, or a spiritual help when it comes to those things, and can apply that to a married relationship, right?
Yeah.
So to say that a priest can't counsel, I think is a little bit ridiculous.
Even the opposite might be the case. That like I can go to any of my married friends and ask for their perspective on a certain marital problem, but I cannot trust them to be objective on that issue because they're a little too close to the situation. So
that's good. A
priest being able to have that kind of distance from the situation is able to kind of look from an outside perspective and say, okay,
and not
these are maybe the deeper issues that are going on.
I was gonna say not having any of those. Like if I have a really good relationship with my wife and someone wants to come ask me because they have a bad relationship, I don't have that experience, and so I don't know how. But like you said, having someone that's completely outside of that can now take an objective look and kind of say, okay, no, here's the real root of the problem here. You know what I mean? Which is kind of
that was a good question.
Yeah, I know.
I like
that's
that. One of our producers sent a question here, and they said like people in religious orders take a vow of celibacy, but priests, diocesan priests, take a promise of celibacy. What's the difference?
Ooh,
and as far as I understand it, a vow is something that you make for your own personal sanctification, like that you work through yourself. And a promise is something that you make for the sake of the kingdom of God and for the church.
Oh,
right. And so you still have to uphold the same, promising a vow. It's similar in a way, but a vow is more directed to your own personal salvation.
So would you say a seminarian took a vow and then took a vow of celibacy, and then as a priest you take a promise?
Sure, you can say that. Yeah.
Okay.
And that actually raises another point. People always ask, do you have to be celibate before you go into the seminary? To be a priest. And the seminary does have requirements for people. They don't want people coming in, obviously, with an active sexual lifestyle. I mean, that's just the indication of someone not living out their Christian vocation. And what the seminary does first is raise good Christian men, right? Good Christian people is what the seminary does. You have to be that first before you're sort of moved toward the priesthood. So someone who's sexually active, is not living a good Christian life, shouldn't be admitted to a seminary. So I think the rule today, one of the requirements today, is that someone should be practicing chastity for at least 2 years.
Oh, is that how long?
Before entering the seminary. The church recognizes that nothing's perfect and whatever it might be.
For instance, a married priest? Married priest. That's right. A married man, his wife dies. He could become a priest?
Oh, yes. So exactly.
But they might be living out their Christian life fully in their marriage and everything else.
Sure.
And they still come over.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things about being admitted to the priesthood. I want to address something you said earlier in the episode, and that is people who always, because everyone's an expert when it comes to priestly celibacy or priests in general, right? Everyone's an expert. No one asks their priest about it, But you said something about like the scandals in the church, and people say the sexual abuse scandal could have been avoided if priests were married, and I find. I find that so insulting. As if to say, marriage would have prevented someone from committing a crime. Like that is, what happened in the sexual abuse scandal was horrible. It's a crime. It's devastating to people. It's horrid, right? And to suggest that that's because someone wasn't married. Also to suggest, that could have been to suggest that could have been prevented if someone was married. But to suggest that happened because of celibacy is an insult to every good priest. And anyone. There are people living chaste lives everywhere in the world that aren't ordained. Right? Like obviously,
and in
people
multiple
who abuse,
different religions.
Exactly.
Not just Catholic.
People who abuse children.
Like
there's an illness there. There's something not right. And so to try and mishmash that up and mix it up with celibacy and our call to be chaste, to serve one another, I think is people need to shake their heads.
That's what I said. It's two totally separate things going on there.
It's insulting, but anything to attack a priest.
Of course. Well, if you think about, and again, not to justify anything else, but if you were to look at the rate that the scandals happen in the church, part of that is because the trust and stuff that are put in priests that was betrayed, right? But then you go to the scandal of teachers and coaches and all that stuff too. Those are all people that again committed a crime, betrayed any kind of trust or what the responsibilities were and everything else. And it doesn't. They are married. You know what I mean? Like they're married and whatever. Like it's not. These are two totally separate issues that come up.
You can't extend that argument to
to the wide population.
Yeah. So
that's a low note to end on. I don't want to end there.
This is a great discussion on this because I think it's a beautiful thing. Now, I just before we end, because we are coming to the end of our time together, for young people who might be considering the priesthood and say like, oh, because today so many young people are wrapped up in this idea that they have to be sexually active because that's what society calls them to, right?
Yeah.
Like all their friends at school talk about it. I mean, everyone talks about it in high school. No one's actually doing it, or few are actually doing it.
There's actually a study right now saying that there are fewer people engaging in sexual activity now in their teenage years than there were in the 70s and 80s.
But why is that?
Well,
they're saying
there's
because
other reasons.
Yes, they're saying because the addiction to pornography
and masturbation,
right, and masturbation. That some people get wrapped up in this world. So this, when someone has an addiction to pornography, and that has kind of shaped your brain and shaped your heart. It's hard to imagine a life without. It's hard to imagine a life of celibate chastity because that's just part of your everyday. That's part of your your psyche, if you will, right? I think God is still calling people to serve as celibate priests. I think God is calling really good young men to be priests. These are difficulties and challenges that can be overcome. These, if God is calling us to it, God gives us the strength to do wonderful things. So young people right now that might think, I can't possibly live a life of celibate chastity. Like when I was 15 or 16,
you wouldn't believe
would I have thought that I could, right? But I'm telling you, I just want to say that is not an obstacle to the priesthood. Because people also say if priests could marry, we'd have more priests. I think that's unfair, to say. I mean, and our Protestant brothers and sisters would not in good conscience agree with that, right? I mean, they're able to marry and they're at a shortage of ministers as well. So God is calling people. Don't be afraid to answer that call.
You got 6 years to figure it out.
But celibate chastity is a beautiful gift. Honestly, it's a beautiful gift to me. It's something that I'm thankful for. I'm grateful for. It's freed me to be of service to people, to love people in the fullest way, to be present for them when other people can't. Right. And just from my experience as a priest, you are present to people at all hours of the day, at all moments, intimate moments of their life, and that's really something special. That's something that comes from the heart of a celibate priest, right? And that's the ministry of Jesus. We're in persona Christi, and that's what we're living out, right? That's what priests live out. So I'm grateful for it. If there are young people listening, you can do it. If God's calling you to do it, He's also gonna give you the strength to live it. And the priest life is really a beautiful life.
You say the graces that you get from it far outweigh the fears of the few years before.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like the graces that you get for the years and years of practicing.
And just before we go, kudos to you two. I know we were talking about priests all night, but married men also have challenges and graces.
And accompanying graces.
And I was talking about good company that priests, you two are the example of good company that priests have, right? And, I remember when I moved here, you two introduced yourselves quickly, and not just because of me. You do that to all your priests that have served you well. So, good for you for being good married people, and mostly good for your wives. Your wives have put up with you, you're a good example to your children.
Behind every good man is a good wife.
If anyone has questions about anything we talked about today, you can send us a message at thecatholicbuzzpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment right below on our Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube channel as well. So for Josh Sullivan, Matt Van Milligan, my name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.